Look, I talked about and belittled and lampooned and criticized, continue to criticize KCBS because the product simply lacks. The radio station is being, in fact, has already been massively undercut and marginalized and really turned into a skeleton of what it used to be. And some of it is controllable, some of it is not. But I've heard, been working on this for many days now, and un how can I put this? Well, unsolicited. Some people who have connections to the radio station, both internally and externally, have told me that a good majority of the staff there, and not just on air people, but off air people, have really begun to, they themselves, question the operation, which subsequently has led to current anxiety levels that I'm told are off the chart. I've often said, folks, media environments, radio stations, television stations, news stations, they're no different than many other work operations, but the intensity level is quite a bit more pronounced because there are personnel decisions, there's ratings to deal with, there's performance, there's especially the environment that we're in today, there's the anxiety level that people have to worry about their jobs. They have to worry about performance. They have to worry about the ratings, the numbers, all that. And KCBS is in utter decline, which is probably among the many reasons why apparently now there exists a extremely high anxiety level. Now, I'm not there, obviously, but I have enough people who have contacted me who have really good sources that tell me that there is now a really mass anxiety level that exists inside the newsroom. And a lot of it has to do with the person in charge at the top. That would be Jennifer Seelig. I refer to her as Jenny Seelig. She hasn't spent an iota, not one moment inside the, how can I put this, in the reporting field. She is running a news operation, ostensibly where you would have some news background. You would have been a reporter yourself or have some involvement in the news business. And she has none. None. And that really intensifies itself when there is a dramatic drop in the cume, which is the median amount of listeners that a radio station has. And at KCBS, it has dropped precipitously to a point where about 10 years ago, it used to be well over 1.5 million, and now it's below 200,000. KCBS is only legit these days because they're a monopoly. I've often said this. They have no competition. They are there, and there is no anybody, for that matter, beating them down. They exist without any competition. Therefore, they get away with a lot of doo-doo that they currently have. I can only put it in those terms because that's what it is. But a good majority of the staff, I'm told, is beginning to feel angst. Combine that with the fact that the parent company of KCBS is in shaken financial ground, and that's Odyssey, where they're just throwing everything up against the wall. Now, some stations do a lot better than KCBS. Hell, many stations do better than KCBS. I've often talked about KNX in LA and the various stations in Philly, of course, New York with 1010 wins, and Philadelphia. But in San Francisco, the situation is unique because being that they're the only news station in town, they're let to do what they're doing. And folks, let me just say this because I heard this information some time back, and I've tried, as I do on every subject matter, but especially when it comes to something like this, I've tried to talk to various people and to try to get the actual mood, to try to get details and all that. And because look, I've given my opinion on what I think of the product at KCBS, and a lot of it is preventable. And a lot of it has to do with what I find. And I don't work there, obviously, but I know and I see and I hear what is taking place. The absolute mismanagement, the actual takedown of a station that had really garnered a lot of respect and admiration. And look, when you're the only operation in town, it makes it a lot easier. Look, they're going to cry and scream about lack of money and all that. They've been saying that for years now, folks. Believe me, they have the money. They have the financial wherewithal to hire, if not great people, if not even good people, at least capable people. And when they hire the direct that they have now, and apparently I'm not the only one, folks, who feels that the station has become dreck. The people that work there, they know what's going on. And there are a sizable amount of people that work there on the air that are right now feeling the strife, the anxiety, and don't know what to do. And I say that in a figurative way. They go and they show up, obviously, and they do what they're capable of doing, which is a whole lot of nothing. And some of it is not their fault. They didn't put a gun to somebody's head and said, hey, hire me. But when you have people, and this is a really, really strong feeling in the newsroom, I'm told, who are really, really fed up with the lack of professionalism, the feeling that the personnel is very, very underwhelming. I'm being really, really diplomatic. And they know what's taking place. And they're quite frankly fed up with the leadership. I can only surmise that because everybody's kind of hinting at that, the sources, the people that work there. And you ought to see the information that I've received from people who used to work there, don't have an axe to grind, are not disgruntled ex employees. They just marvel, but in the wrong way, about how bad it's become. How once a cherished newsroom, the place where they had great reporters and pretty damn good anchors, and where they had the news presentation being as terrific as it was, seeing it now underperform and with very uncapable, very, very minuscule personnel running it into the ground. And the absolute mishmash of anchors here, anchors there, part time people, full time people, people that have no schedule, getting a reporter to this story, but then not being able to get a reporter to that story. The absolute question mark every day: who's going to be on during this hour? Who's going to be the traffic anchor at that hour? And you'll notice, and this is what I'm told too, a lot of the people, the senior staff who still work there, you'll notice if you listen, the few people that listen still, there are many, many veterans there who've taken and continue to take a lot of time off that they're due, vacation days and all that. And look, they've earned that right to do that. My point is they are doing it now, while still staying on at the radio station so they can build up their financial reservoir when it's time to either retire, to take a buyout offer, or to prepare for the inevitable. And that's, we want you out of here, which, I even hinted at the other day because of the fact that it's towards the end of the month. And usually that's when companies like Odyssey do their dirty work. Now, for the record, I haven't heard anything yet of layoffs or acceptance of buyout terms offered to various people. So perhaps either one of two things is taking place, in addition to the mass anxiety level that exists within the newsroom. There is going to be a delay. Maybe there's not going to be a purge in July, or I should say late June. Maybe they stick it out, they being Odyssey, they stick it out until the fall. Maybe they see new revenue streams emerging. I doubt that, because you keep reading about the overall fiscal health of Cumulus, which is not obviously owning of uh, of KCBS, but it's Odyssey, which is now owned by this person, um, the Soros founder, who may or may not have radio as his prime motivator. But you combine that with what has happened to KCBS, and I can see the anxiety level being what it is. But I'm told it's never been like this. So the rank and file, they see the handwriting on the wall. And I do believe that there is a mass resentment taking place at Selig. Now, whether or not that manifests itself into a move, I don't know. There's been rumors that maybe she heads to LA, where she, as I reported, probably had something to do with the ouster of Julie Chen, who used to be the news director at KNX in LA, where, knowing the background of Selig, she'll probably screw up KNX. Or maybe she takes over KNX and KCBS. Boy, that would be something. You want to talk about an anxiety level, a degree of distrust and disgust. Again, without me being there, but hearing the comments and getting the information that's been thrown my way, I understand the situation without being there. Look at the numbers. I just mentioned the Cume. Their advertising revenue, well, it's been down for many, many years now. That's no big surprise. But you deal with what you're dealt with. That's just the way life is, right? We all deal with the cards that are shown us. She can't handle that. And by the way, I don't care if fact that she's a woman, if it's a guy, if he's black or white or Asian or green or yellow. She just simply cannot handle the job at hand. She doesn't know how to manage. She doesn't know how to hire. I'll give her this. Some of this is not her fault, but a good majority of it is her fault. And by the way, as the cliche is, but it's true, the buck stops here. So it's on her watch. And there are a lot of things that she can do better, and she chooses not to. Probably because she feels as if she's bulletproof. Look at what she's been able to get away with, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that she's been there a while, worked her way up. I'll give her that. But she simply doesn't have news acumen. She doesn't have news chops. And that is felt, and apparently is the driven force that is currently the drive behind the complete and utter negativity and anger and frustration and anxiety level that has reached epic proportions at KCBS. Mind you, a station that is at the top, but only because of the fact they're alone. They can only, what? No competition. They can only do what they do and not feel it any other which way. There's no incentive to. They get away with it. The bosses know that. Her bosses know that, yet they don't do anything. Well, for now, they haven't. Believe me, folks, if this rancor is, if this strife gets worse, and it's probably going to get a hell of a lot worse before it gets better, then somebody's got to pay the price. And guess who's at the top of the list if this continues on? Well, yeah. People are not fools who work there. There are some, but believe me, there's a whole bunch of people there. They know what's taking place. They understand. And it's going to get to the big bosses if it hasn't already. Trust me on that one, folks.